Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to this little podcast series where I'm going to explore and discuss past lives. And there are many different approaches to past lives and reincarnation. And I'm not going to go the traditional esoteric new agey way with this topic, although that just sprung to mind here. I was, for another purpose on the whole Changemaker YouTube channel, I were putting in some of the understandings of the future technologies that are being implemented into our reality field as it is of now. And there I wanted actually to refer to the book I wrote in 2017 on some of the military projects, modern history. But there was a review of one that claimed that it's still there, by the way, but claimed that I'm just another one of the bunch that is also preaching to the choir, being a guru and being religious and all these kind of things. And that could not be further from the truth. So thereby, I want to put in here, so that is completely clear. Yes, I do have a bachelor degree in theology, but I'm absolutely not religious. And I do not in any ways or forms believe in any ways or forms of God or source or anything that goes with that. On the complete contrary. So why did I do a bachelor degree in theology? Well, because I actually thought that there might be some hint in the ancient scriptures of what we could call some of the understandings of the higher order sciences of our reality field, which has been downgraded into what has been made and are called spiritualism, as well as spirituality, as well as religion. And that is where I'm just kind of putting my foot down and say, okay, could we please get the higher order sciences back in and see things from a different angle? And what is that angle? And that's part of these higher order systemic energetic awareness that I am here working towards. Those of you familiar with my work on the whole academy, you know I've done the progression sciences, which teaches how to develop the transformative energy system, where we work with the density 2 energies of the middle domain to recalibrate our 6-layered higher order energy system. It has nothing to do with New Age. It is a completely different way of approaching our energy system. It has nothing to do with chakra systems, on the contrary, but it has all to do with what we would understand as the other dimensional realities and how to operate with these other dimensional realities. And they will say, well, is it the same as the Kalontics or the Guardian Alliances or the Galactic Federation and these kind of things? And I say, no, it has nothing to do with that either. But I allude to these things from time to time, including the Alice A. Bailey material, as well as the Blavatsky material, as well as religion, as well as science, as well as psychology, because I'm also a psychotherapist. And I've had my own practice for years, and I work with many, many clients, and I worked as a clairvoyant, and I'm also a healer. So yes, I am definitely working with the expanded perception field that humans have, the expanded awareness. And that's where I want to go with this. That's why I call the progression sciences. Because how do we develop our human civilization into what it once were as an advanced solar system civilization that were positioned and were living on all of the planets in our solar system that used to be part of other dimensions and other realities before things kind of began to fall apart. And that's the long story I've made my version of in my 6 books, which are to be seen as historical background information. The latest version of it is in the transition science course material, as well as in the different whole academy courses that I'm making, including some of the projects that I have there, which is the whole Changemaker project, where I look into, okay, how do we then, if we do have an alternate reality perception, how do we then create business? And what does business then mean? How do we create hybrid projects where the goal is not to work transformative energy and use transformative energy for profit, but actually to transform reality into a higher version of what reality is? And what does that mean? And what does that imply? And that's where sciences comes in, because what are relative reality dynamics, especially if we understand that it is our reality construction is imbued with a lot of alien technology, including original advanced technology of the original solar system civilizations. So this is a completely different approach. So it has nothing to do with spirituality. And I'm definitely not a guru. And no, I'm not a teacher either, because guru is just Hindu and means teacher. So this is so way off that criticism, which of course was a little bit of a kick in the stomach, right? When people claim that they understand what they read two sentences in a book, and then they make this whole long accusation of who and what you are, and think that they have got you sorted and put you in the category where you don't belong. So just put that one in there. That's why I'm taking the effort here to make sure that those of you who are listening to this one, you don't fall into that trap and classify me within a group I don't belong, because my whole work is about trying to get us out of spirituality. My whole work is trying to get us out of religion. My whole work is to get us out of general sciences and get beyond relativity, Einsteinian science approach, quantum-based transhumanism, right? So this is something completely different, and has nothing to do with conspiracy theory either. And my approach has very little to do with the common understanding of the alien agenda. So no, I am outside all of the boxes, which I also used to be as part of the base program, just so you kind of know that. While I was working within corporate business as a recruiter, human resource recruiter, and consultant within different types of businesses, where I then climbed up the ladder, as you know, in different positions, until I finally just said, yeah, that's kind of it. Now I learned what I needed to learn here. Let me go into where I actually can begin to blossom with what I find humanity can achieve, and what humans of the future, how they should look, without going into the traps of using technology, gene editing, CRISPR, any forms of eugenics, any forms of these kind of things, because we all have the potential for growth. But it comes down to, as I have touched ground with in my material, as well as how I will approach reincarnation here, it comes down to a different aspect of what is a living being, and what is a human being, and what does it mean to exist inside this reality field, and what is this reality field, and what is it if we take away in our equation, we take away all ideas of creation, of gods and goddesses, and or single gods, or monotheistic gods, or whatever you can come up with that humanity the last 12,000 years have used as explanation for that big, vast space that they have had little understanding of. Of course, we can say that modern anthropology, including 200 years ago, was seeing the early civilizations as enormously primitive, which we now know today they weren't. But they definitely had ideas of the gods. But the question is, do we interpret the text material that's left correctly? Do we interpret what's been shown to us in some of the monolithic cities and what's left of the monolithic structures? Are we interpreting these correct? Or could they actually be remnant, solidified, crystalline structures that used to be part of another type of fourth dimension, which is my claim, which due to different wars of the hijacking of the different D10 collective as they came in, also the fourth dimension solidified it further and created a new type of human, which is the basic level of our current civilization. And that is what, in that context, as in kind of, okay, then what is reincarnation in that context? What does that mean then? Is there even reincarnation? Is there even time as we understand it? Is there even past lives? Could that just be different type of programs that are connected to this body in the now, that this body is only born once? The energy system is only utilized once because it's used in so many different timelines and so many different harvesting projects that once the body and the energy system breaks down, it's not being recirculated. Or could there be another possibility that there are some kind of library storage unit in the artificial fourth run by grace, artificial insemination? What kind of projects are we talking about when we talk reincarnation? So that's where I want to take us, just with those of you thinking, oh yeah, reincarnation, that's just kind of everyday thing. It's been said out there because I made on the chakras teaching system, which I there deconstruct and say it's void. It has no longer any purpose. It was seeded into this reality field by the Brahims that came from what people refer to as Atlantis, which I call the human humanoid fifth cycle, original fifth cycle colonies that were seeded into this reality field as an attempt to try and undo some of the effects of the middle domain and some of the other systemic races that that were present in our reality field at the time due to what we call the timeline event, or what I call the timeline event, which is the Big Bang. So this is a completely different approach when we look into this extra systemic approach to what are our world, what is the solar system, what are humans, why are we here, why do we have memories of past lives? Could it be programs? Could it be insertions? Could it be put in, is it a part of alternate realities? Could it be, as I claim in the clearing work with the alien inserted technology, that's part of storyboards where our original genetics are put into simulations and we then recall it as past lives, so there are no past lives, but that these different simulations could be connected to clones, which from there can be used for harvesting, and that bleeds through into our current present and alters our molecular state, which gives an indication of changing the epigenetics, so to speak, the surface of our cells, so they receive, the receptors are kind of susceptible for different forms of infusions of what we could call electrochemical processes that alters the RNA in a different way, so that we will be linked up to different alternate reality projects, just to throw that one in there in that level. So this is where you begin to understand, okay, this is not just the ordinary reincarnation approach to this. And I want to use some of my own examples of how I got in contact with some of my own past lives, quote unquote. We don't know if it is a past life or if it's a program or it's a simulation. We are open to that idea. So what I want to put here is not to give, oh, that's this or that or whatever, because to be honest, I am still not completely 100% sure. I'm pretty sure some things, and other things are a little bit difficult to deal with, because there are the molecular memory, there are the different processes of our physicality. There's a psychological approach to it. And that's the one I want to address here. And why do I want to address it this way? Because I am getting ready to what's called the hope work, the higher order progressive energies, where I'll begin to change or reconfigure the three lower fields that we are calling the biofield, the emotional field, and the mental field, which in earlier times were called the etheric field, the astral field, and the mental field, right? So these are different approaches to this. And the reason why I use these different approaches is because when we work as humans inside this reality, we have our biofield that is connected to our human DNA. That's actually connected to the mind field that operates in the fifth dimension, just to make that one clear so you get that distinction. But the lower level of the mind field, the mental level, is connected to the neural network. So we have different levels of our existence as an expanded human. We understand, let's just work with that way. We have the emotional field that is connected to the limbic system. It's connected to the electrochemical processes of our body. It's connected to the glands. It's connected to the peripheral nervous system. It's connected to how the cells operate. The perimeter of the cell is driven by our emotional field. Our emotional field is what we operate and work with in psychology. That's why we have the spectrum of different understandings of emotions that can also be called feelings. If you like, emotions are typically defined as more the electrochemical processes that initiate certain sensations in the body, which the brain then interprets as feelings, which we then respond to in different ways, all depending on our psychological structure, all depending on our belief systems, and all depending on our perception of the world, which is called cognitive schemes. That's the way we perceive reality. That's how we choose to interpret reality and the electrochemical processes. So that's where feelings come in. That's kind of where you put on a value on the electrochemical process, which are emotions. So you kind of have the instinctual emotions that goes with the primitive levels of our emotional field. And then you have the more advanced levels that goes with feelings, where we put in value systems and interpretation. And then we go even further up, where we could say, or further down, if you like, using Carl Gustav Jung's subconscious, where we then begin to work with what is beneath our conscious awareness. And that means our everyday awareness, as in kind of what we have had early childhood trauma. Or we could just say, just kind of go as a spectrum, as in kind of, how many of you actually remembers what happened 3 months ago? If you had some kind of pain or sad experience, how many of you remember that one? That's kind of been suppressed a little bit. It's kind of not in the forefront of your frontal lobe process. processes where you have your everyday awareness, your alpha state centered, as in kind of the lower levels of the frontal lobes, because the frontal lobes can go up to the gamma frequency band, where they then begin to process what we call very high order levels of information, including theta state, where you then go into what we call the what's connected to the frontal lobes as the whole memory system, the hippocampus that connects to the limbic system, that connects to the instinctual level of the little brain, and the pons, and the whole automatic system of your body that goes with the molecular processes. And where do these impulses come from? That's where I want to play in with the past lives, because they are part of how our body as a molecular organism, as part of a field. Rupert Sheldrake coined it the morphogenetic field. I just call it the biofield, because it goes with the bio-DNA. And I want to put in here that when we talk about the higher order type of system, energy system that goes with the density energies and the realities beyond what we have in our present day awareness focused on, due to the frequency spectrum narrowness and limited perception field that runs by the neural network and our belief systems, and how we have been taught to perceive reality via indoctrination, via school system, via sciences, via whatever you find on the internet, right? That defines how we perceive reality and narrows it down to a specific reality perception. But if we go beyond that and say, okay, there are more to that in expanded awareness, which mystics have told us about, which are that's why I studied some of the older texts, the Book of Enoch or Enoch, some of the older spiritual teaching systems, the Qumran text material, whatever, the Hindu material, the Bailey material, the Blavatsky material, the Kanontic materials, Michael Newton, to name one, Dolores Cannon, a lot of different people that have worked with past lives and the understanding of past lives, and there had my own already understanding of what it was, but we're looking into others, as you do as a researcher. You look into what are others coming up with, what have they got of information when they have been in contact. For instance, Dolores Cannon working with people in theta state, who came through, what memories came through, what was the perception, and the differences there. For instance, just to take overall speaking around Atlantis, she had many different people that had different variations and different interpretations of Atlantis, which is interesting in itself, because you can say, well, you have two people in this world, they will interpret this world differently. Not when we talk about alien technology, not when we talk about some foundational dynamics within the reality. There are commonalities if you were born under Second World War, or grew up under Second World War, no matter where you lived on the planet. Yes, you would remember it as part of being in America or being in Germany. There would be a huge difference there, but you would still remember the overall picture that was Second World War, and that was in the 40s or in the late 1930s into the 40s, whatever it was. There did be some similarities. And these accounts of the Atlantis were so dissimilar as in kind of, okay, does that then mean there are different variations of Atlantis? Or does it mean that Atlantis, as we understand of it, is a construction, it's a program, a rabbit hole for people that expands their awareness into certain levels of their subconscious, into the deeper layers of their emotional field, because quite a lot of these accounts are very emotional. They touch people in a profound ways, alter their perception of self and others. They're often linked to priesthoods and stuff that kind of, was it even there, or is that kind of a construction, similar to when we talk about people that are going through the Ascended Master programs and initiation programs, which the Blavatsky and the Bailey material talks about, where you then understand, well, there's these crystal palaces and Shambhala and all of these kind of things. And people say, oh, I've been there and been in the halls of wisdom. I've been in this. And you have in Book of Enoch, he goes to the seven heavens, as St. Paul also did. He also went to the seven heavens, and he had the vision of Christ. What was that? Was a hollow insert, or was it actually a vision of Christ, or did he just have a brain meltdown? So these are the questions that we kind of need to ask ourselves. What is it that with all of these ancient texts, because it's not, people are not making it up. There are so many texts and so much evidence that kind of shows that people have otherworldly experiences. And what are these otherworldly experiences, right? were they actually there, or was it people from the future that traveled back and then entered into reality via what we could call alternate reality gate system that alters the kind of when you have alien crafts that come in, or you have this alternate reality perception where the other dimension bleed through, where you can feel the densification of the air around you, silence, things are different, things slow down, and suddenly you see things you normally don't see, as when I saw that humongous big craft in Australia that came out of the clouds. It was this weird moment of everything stood still, and I was in this heightened energetic state, and by that I could see it coming out the clouds. And then when I began thinking about it, snapped out of it, then it retracted and it disappeared again. And I'm always thinking, oh damn, I should have kept that that energy level, because then I would have understood what it was, because it was clearly coming for me. It was not to abduct me, but it was clearly showing itself to me for a reason. So, I remember seeing a documentary, I think it was called Australian Skies, where this guy who was not a UFO hunter, but he had this kind of interviews with people that had seen crafts, and these people that often woke up in the morning feel, today I'm going to see a craft, as if they were already coded for it, which I will claim is accurate. They were already coded for it, because there are these different groups within humanity that have either underworld visions or being shamans or what have you. That's the underworld, which are, in my perspective, older levels of our planetary network, not the Akashic records, but kind of what we call imprints that are left in the different layers of our planet, because our planet is built upon layers and layers and layers, sediments of older ages and civilizations and what has been before. Remember, as an archaeologist, you dig in the ground, you dig deep down, and you find dinosaur bones, because that's for 250,000 years ago or so. That's deep down in the soil. So you have to dig deep to get to that layer where that was the surface of our planet. And that's not just the physical stuff that's left there. All minerals, everything, the bones, whatever's left there, have an energetic imprint, has an energetic counter. And that's typically referred to as what we call the astral plane, where that's the plane that kind of whatever you see there is I call it the distortion plane, because for me it's connected to the emotional field. And what people often see there are mostly via their subconscious interpretation mechanism. So therefore it's a little bit dream state-like. And I'm not this kind of person that do astral travel. I see no point in traveling the distortion fields. On the contrary, my recommendations are that these are to be cleared and not to be investigated further, because they're full of all sorts of weird critters that if you focus on them, they look at you and they attach to you, and then they become energetic parasites. And we have got plenty of these because of the different harvesting projects and the inserted alien prohibiting technology that has created further energetic parasites in our higher order energy system and is breaking it down, which is part of the clearing process. Hopefully this will be less as our planetary system reconfigures into density 1, where the middle domain regressed genetics no longer play a huge role, because they can't exist in the outer domain or density 1, and will then diminish the parasitic growth potentials within humans that are not utilizing and purifying and clearing their higher order energy system that's connected to the middle domain of our planetary reality field, which is the outer domain. You have the outer domain, the middle domain, the inner domain, and the core domain. And the outer domain are what we call terrestrial. The middle domain is what people call stellar or systemic, as I call it, because that's where we begin to go into deeper systems of collectives of races that works together in these collectives and networks and reality fields, which is not stellar but systemic. So that's something entirely else. It's not visible on the sky. It's not the constellations on the sky. It's not the stars on the sky. It is something different. Then we have the inner domain, which people mostly refer to as the galactic plane. What we see inside this reality is an extension of the reality program that expands as far as we can expand our consciousness potentials inside the frequency-based perception fields. Well, then that expands into an extended version of what the universal construction is made of. So the moment we invent that there is a galaxy out there, and deliberately saying invent because we have astronomers, we have the mathematics, mathematical astronomy that predicts that this must be there, and actually they're creating that it will be there because that's part of the holographic reality field that we are part of, that you can create realities which are connected to different mythology and different types of ways of working with energy. Whether you are working with frequency, you there use algorithms or equations or mathematical compositions of different forms of symbols you put together and you call it an equation. But by that you define different dynamics, by that you define different outcomes, and by that you focus on it, and by that you are co-creating from that idea that that must exist. You're creating a thought form, you're creating the pattern of it, you're creating the symbols of it, you're creating the equations of it, the dynamics, and by that you're putting it to life, especially if you can get more scientists to agree that this is what it is, peer review it and say, yeah, we come to the same conclusions, and then run simulations in computer programs, and lo and behold, in the future, quantum computers. And there you have it. There we can begin to alter the quantum level, which is already in the making, using the entanglement principles as Fermilab have come up with, and create quantum bridges. So yo ho ho, here we go, getting ready to reverse time and the traverse time, so that time is no longer irreversible, but can travel back and forth between the two entanglement points, nodal points in the holographic network, right? So this is where we're going. This is where we're heading. So why even bother about reincarnation and past lives in that context? Well, let's get a little bit down to earth. The only reason why I brought it up to that high level to begin with was that those of you who are going into this podcast series thinking you're going to hear about the Hindu reincarnation system, you are not on the right track here. That's not how I'm going to approach it. For those of you thinking that the past life I'm going to talk about is within spiritism, as in talking to the dear ones, I've talked to a lot of the ones that were not ready to cross over. I got a lot of my information from what we call emotional mental fields that have left behind and have decided not to leave, still stuck on the astral plane. Some of them are stuck on the mental plane. Once they're stuck on the mental plane, they become more what we could call energetic parasites. But on the astral plane that's connected to the emotional fields, they can keep themselves alive by being attached to humans that they care about, family members and other houses or circumstances where there are these imprints of what we call historical event or energetic imprint of certain things, wars, blood sacrifice, other stuff that's been going on there or a tragedy or a trauma, a killing or what have you, which is similar to a blood sacrifice. That alters the astral energy behind our reality. That's the distortion field, and allows for things to linger on and attach to it, be attached to houses, to items, to figurines, to different forms of shells that you can put it into, whether we talk about golems or mirages or whatever type of stupidities that people have used over the course of time to try and harness these astral entities and grant powers for them, grant knowledge from them, not understanding that by doing so they were opening up Pandora's box and got influx of different energetic parasites that then possesses them and live by their energy. And yeah, they might get different powers, but the matter of the fact is that they've been sucked dry by entities that are utilizing their energies in a negative way, and by that are creating more distortion, so that when they cross over, they get stuck on the astral plane as well. And that's what the astral plane is for me, and that's why I call it the distortion field, because that's where we got the shells of the human stupidity. So this is not reincarnation. So to put that in that context, so you kind of have a little bit of a background information. Okay, this is going to be a different approach. So what do I want to work with? And that's the next podcast where I will talk a little bit about this, because I want to use it as a means to understand our psychological structure more than the molecular structure. These things are interconnected. Remember, the emotional field are connected to the biofield. The emotional field runs the perimeter of the cell, and the mental field runs the core of the cell. I teach this in the transition science course material, and that links up to different fields that are part of our emotional field. Our emotional field are composed of 9 layers. These 9 layers are connected to what we call 5 of the 9 layers are connected to the mental field. The rest are intertwined with the biofield biofield. So therefore we have the psychosomatic connection. That means that what you feel affects your molecular state, which we know from epigenetics. So I'm not making this up as a kind of, oh yeah, that's fantastic. But I'm taking it to the next level where we can say, well, what if we add into the equation past lives? Or you could say, well, should we then also talk about past lives as clones or alternates or alternate realities or fourth dimensional subs? Or what are we dealing with here? And yes, that definitely plays in. But here I want to narrow it down to just the understanding of when we do meditation, when we do work with our emotional field in meditation, and how do we get through the subconscious and different layers of the astral plane into the level where we actually can come in contact with our past lives, because there is a path there that goes through psychological work in this life, understanding the traumas and the childhood issues of this life. And then we begin to work through the subconscious, where we could use Jung's, Carl Gustav Jung's material, where we can use archetypes, or we can use other approaches, but we could also use meditation to do so. And I have there suggested the double hand position to amplify the heart field. I'm using some of the Buddhist techniques, which I want to address as well. Where did I get that one from? Actually, from a past life. So there are certain things we can learn from our past lives that we can incorporate and integrate into the present version of ourselves, understanding that these psychodynamics of past lives and lessons learned in past lives, not as in Earth is a school, but as human beings having lived on other timelines, be it in the now or in the past, we don't really know, but it's a different version of us. So let's just play with the horizontal spectrum of, it could be the past, but it could also just be a different timeline or a different variation of us, or an alternate reality version of us in a different segment of our reality that is placed in a more primitive setting, which we then interpret as the past, but it could actually also be the now. We don't know these kind of things. So therefore, when we talk about reincarnation, is it really reincarnation, or is it bicarnation, as in, or multiple carnation, as in being in multiple forms at the same time? Should we then revise the whole idea of reincarnation, as in we are being incarnated again from another existence of a previous timeline or previous level of history into the current form? And what is that about? What's the bridge there? How do we get into this form? Or how are the dynamics of this? And the Bailey material talks about that. The Hindus talk about that. There are different understandings of this. Some say it's done by the gods. Others say it's done by karma. Others say it's done by, it's kind of automatic. The wheel of samsara, that's a kind of wheel that perpetuates wheel of life force that circulates and are put into different bodies. Also in the idea when I talk about the biofield and the fetal pattern, where they're addressed, well, there is some kind of consciousness principle that is part of an energy system that are being put into a joint field of the parents when they do have sex, and they do egg and cell meet up and creates the zygote. Well, that connects to that biofield that then becomes the foundation of our physical form that is grown inside the womb of the mother. So there are something about it. But the question is it transfer from another similar timeline because the body has run out of juice there, and then we just transfer it into this one, in this timeline, as in what I call multiple timeline, horizontally on the same level and within the same time spectrum? Or are we talking about pocket realities with different segments that are presented to be as in the past when they're actually going on the now, similar as when we begin to work with some of the future insights that I have as well from the future? Is it because I come from the future? Am I here on a mission statement from the future? I remember entering here from the Andromedan system via some of the old quantum bridges that are called Fermi gates in the future. Where do I know that one from, right? So these are some of the things that are the questions that must be asked. And that's the approach I want to do on this. Even though I do call it reincarnation, perhaps we should call it multiple incarnation. In some way or some form, discussing these features and what does that mean, and how can we use these otherworldly experiences of otherworldly selves or other reality selves or pocket reality selves? How can we use these insights and memories and integrate this and work our way through the traumas that are connected to that affects our molecular state? Because if we have that trauma of a similar life or a parallel life or a past life, and they undergo some kind of molecular change due to trauma, death, some sort of incidents that harms the physical form, creates an emotional effect that is signified as a trauma, and that ripples into our form here because we're interconnected. Well, would that then explain some of the diseases that we're seeing that are unfolding in humans, or some of the phobias we have, or some of the peculiarities that people are having as a kind of fear of elevators? Where does that come from? If we can't find sort of, she was kind of incarcerated for a short period of time in an elevator when she was a child. If there's nothing like that, then why is there a fear of elevator or confined spaces? Where does that come from? So these are some of the questions I want to explore in that expanded version of psychology, where, again, remember, I'm a psychotherapist. I work with clients. I work in the normal setting of psychotherapy. It's called existential psychotherapy, family dynamics, psychodynamics, psychosocial dynamics, psychosocial sexual dynamics, all of these kind of things. And here I want to push it a little bit further and say, okay, we're here talking about past life because I have worked with several past lives in my awakening process, as in kind of what is awakening, but my expansion process of expanding my perception of reality, perception of self, expanding it into other levels of who and what I am, expanding it into other timelines and multiple reality settings from where I see other versions of what we call identification markers. We could call other versions of self, but other experiencing nodal points in the holographic network of our reality, or whatever fancy way we can put it, to go around some of the concepts that confines us. When we talk about reincarnation, and bam, we're drawn to the thought form of the chakra system, the Hindu system, and the wheel of samsara, or the Buddhist ideas, or what have you, or New Age, or Spiritism, or all of these kind of ideas that has been put into our reality field and the collective consciousness structures of who and what we are and how we identify these topics via what we have studied and what we have read and what we have experienced. So here I want to turn it all around, as I do with everything, because I'm not to be put into a box and say, oh, I'm this or that or whatever. On the contrary, I'm exploring everything. Let's throw all the balls up in the air and start to think anew, so we can come up with some of the more broad spectrum, expanded ideas of what it is, instead of constantly drawing on 2,000-year-old material that were bred in a different culture, in a different setting, in different civilizations and other places on the planet, and not within the current civilizations that we are living in now. For that understanding, I am born and grew up in Denmark. I have spent a number of trips in Australia, 5 to be exact, of 3 months each, where I work with different levels of reality in Australia, because Australia is very connected and has free access to the 4th dimension, actually. So that was very interesting, which we don't have in Denmark. I grew up on what we call the Scandinavian model. We are having a different kind of humanitarian, social democratic approach to humans. We are taking care of each other. We pay an enormous high level of tax, but we have free schooling system. We have free access to university. We have free access to healthcare. We pay that over our taxes, which is not seen many other places in the world. We might be of the same breed, so to speak, those of us who are living in the Western world, but we have different cultures. We have different approaches to what life is, what we are as humans. We have the same emotional range, but how we interpret it and how we deal with our emotions, how we deal with our psychodynamics differ from civilization to civilization, from nation to nation, from country to country. which we also see with other countries around the world that have different social dynamics, that have different social cultural systems from where they interpret reality in their way and see that as what we call legit, and that's the way that they want to live, and that's the way they want to exist. And that does not mean that there's something that's better or worse or anything, but we must just recall that even though we look the same, we talk the same, we act the same, we have different approaches to reality, and that is just on the base program level. So with that understood, then why not also have different approaches to what the higher order sciences are, what the extra dimensional layers are of our mind field, what the extra perceptual cognitive processes could be if we expand our neural network to operate on different type of structural layers that are connected to different forms of energies. That alters the brain foundationally, creating higher order senses that we don't need to classify as clairvoyance or clear cognizance or whatever it's all called. Very, very difficult to say, but just say that, yes, we have the five senses that are connected to the physical form inside this reality, but we have the equivalent of the higher order senses that are connected to other levels of our reality, where we will see and hear and taste and sense other levels of reality in a different manner, that we need to train our brain to be able to interpret correctly and receive the information correctly. So that's part of the expansion processes, which I would like to coin. Instead of talking about awakening, I would talk about progressive expansion of our human awareness, of our human consciousness potentials, so that we get a broader awareness from where we can develop our consciousness consciously in a manner to become what we call highly advanced civilization that we used to be. So that's my purpose of this little investigation into different forms of multiple, similar, parallel, past, present, future versions of being in some kind of organic vessel from where we perceive reality within a limited energetic band of energy units that then defines how we interpret what life is and what a living being is and what it means to be alive. Thank you.